Et bonjour à tous et bienvenue à cette rencontre du comité de dérogation pour la Ville d'Ottawa. Welcome everyone to this hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. We're Panel 1, Urban Area. Probably already know that. We are a City of Ottawa quasi-judicial tribunal that holds public hearings to consider Planning Act applications, including minor variances and consents, including permissions as well. We've seen more of those types of applications coming forward. Our hearings, as you can see, are back to being in person, but they're hybrid. So we also have people who join us online. Remote participation is permitted, obviously, and allowable. All you need to do is request to have that through committee staff if that's your interest. You're live streaming on YouTube, and the video will be archived and available for future viewing by the public on the committee's website. My name is Anne Tremblay, and I'll be chairing the hearing today. With me today is Mr. John Blatherwick. We also have member Lecueillier, who is online. We also have member Coakley, who is here, but he'll be joining us in a few minutes after we get through the opening remarks, essentially. So in terms of the procedures, we had the agenda at the start of the hearing. We have the discretion, obviously, to play with that order, and we will today because we have a number of applications that are for adjournment, others that can be fast-tracked, and then we're going to hear presentations from a few others. So note that the panel members have reviewed all the materials that are related to the applications that are before us, including the planning reports and any written submissions, either in support or in opposition. So today we're going to hear some oral submissions, and that we have a speakers list. So we'll go first to the speakers list. But if there's anyone who'd like to speak to an application and you're not on the speakers list, that's okay. Whether you're online or you're in person, all you need to do is raise your hand if you're online and also in the audience, and we'll invite you to come down. So as part of the statutory public notification requirements, each application is required to post a sign on the property in question before the hearing. We have all of those stat decks with us today, so we're not going to have an issue there. The panel may ask for a brief presentation on an application, followed by questions to the applicant or the agent and to city staff. So what we typically do is we hear the evidence from the applicant and the agent, and then we try to get some clarification on points if need be. And then we go to members of the public, starting with our speakers list. That gives everyone an opportunity to provide any input in the applications so that we may deliberate on all of that. If you're not on my speakers list, I will ask you to essentially provide me with your full name and your municipal address, and you may need to even spell out your last name, but it's for the record to make sure that we have accuracy. So at the end of the hearing on an application, the panel has a number of options. So we can either make an oral decision, or we can reserve our decision, and obviously we can deny an application. If the application is reserved, it just means that the committee wants to further deliberate on the application after the close of the hearing, but the decision is still made today before anybody goes anywhere. So in all cases, though, and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send an official written decision and the reasons for it to all parties and any participants and anyone else who has an interest and has asked for a copy of the decision. So if there's anybody who would like these instructions in French, just let me know. I'm happy to repeat them. So with that, we have essentially declarations of conflict of interest. Is there any panel member who would have a conflict of interest? No, on this it's got to be either this agenda or any agendas of any of the other panels. So for the record, for those that are participating with us now, and we will have to check with member Coakley when he comes in, there are no declarations of conflict of interest. So now we're going to go to the minutes. We have minutes of the January 17th hearing. I take it all members have had a chance to have a look. Any concerns, anything to raise, or are we adopting the minutes? All right. I think I'm seeing that the minutes are good. So for the record, they're approved. Okay, so with that, then we have, as I mentioned at the outset, a number of adjournments. In fact, we have maybe 7. So let's start with our long list with number 2, which is 81 Spadina. I'm looking for Mr. Bisson. Is he in the audience or is he online? Mr. Bisson. Do we have Mr. Bisson?
Madam Chair, he is online.
He is online. Okay. Should I go to the next, or are we having an issue with bringing
Good
Mr.?
afternoon, Madam Chair.
Hello, Mr. Bisson. Good afternoon. All right, so you're aware that there is a request for adjournment on this application?
I am.
Can you just give us a brief explanation as to why we're adjourning your application?
There was two aspects, is to give us time to discuss the application with the community association, and the planner outlined that there was 2 additional variances required.
All right, so for that case, you would be okay with the sine die adjournment to give the opportunity for recirculation of the application?
Yes, we are.
All right, thank you. With that then, any questions from the panel members on this adjournment request? No? Is there anyone in the audience or online who would like to speak to this proposal for adjournment sine die on this application? All right, I'm not seeing any. So from the committee then, all those in favor? All right, so Mr. Bisson, your application is adjourned sine die, and we'll see you again sometime in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, the second one is number 5 for 469 Wilbrod Street. Mr. Vio is who I'm looking for. Mr. Vio.
Madam Chair, the agent doesn't appear to be online. This one was up for sine die, so it could proceed with that without him.
All right, so were we aware that Mr. Vio was not going to be attending the hearing?
No, we hadn't heard one way or the other.
All right, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to step it down to the end, and we'll put another caller just in case he's just late. And if not, then we'll deal with it at that time. Okay. All right, so the next one is for 407, 409, and 411 Queen Street. I'm looking for Mr. Nahal. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Ms. Nahal works with my team, but it's Mr. Bolduc, Jacob Bolduc, from Foten Planning and Design.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on, Mr. Baltic, otherwise I would have recognized you.
No problem.
All right, so if you wouldn't mind just briefly explaining the reason for the deferral.
Yeah, of course. No, this comes from our side. So we've had several conversations with staff, and Ms. Linker has been great at working with us and answering all of our questions. We originally went through infill forestry to get the to see if a TIR would be required, and because no trees were being removed, it was not required. We did get follow-up comments after submission that indicated that there may be some opportunities for more consolidated landscaping in the front yard where we're proposing the parking. So we are significantly increasing the amount of green space over what currently exists, but maybe those spaces are a little more fragmented than they need to be. So we've taken the time to provide a revised plan, and we plan to go back to both the infill forester and Ms. Linker to see if we can find some improvements. We've read the staff report. We understand there's some concerns. We've also received community association concerns. We have a new plan that we've generated, but it was only ready yesterday afternoon, not quite ready for circulation and to provide a meaningful discussion today. So we're not looking for an adjournment sine die. We would ask for a month in order to be able to confirm that revised plan, look for other opportunities, meet with staff, provide it to them, and see if we can perhaps get a more positive outcome in the staff report.
All right, I'm glad you mentioned a month because the date I had was February 21st. So you're looking for March 6th?
That'd be correct.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Balduc? Nope. All right. Just over to our coordinator's house, our meeting for March 6th. Are we good?
Yeah, we're still building the agenda, so there's lots of room still.
All right, perfect. Okay, so with that, Anyone in the audience or online want to speak to this adjournment request to March 6th? Not seeing anybody. Members of the panel, all those in favor? All right, so for the record, the decision is unanimously to adjourn to March 6th. So we will see you then, and good luck.
Thank you very much. Take
All
care.
right, thank you. All right, the next one is 97 McLaren, looking for Mr. Falsetto.
Chair Trombley, I'm the planner on the file, and I do not believe that the applicant is here today, but the coordinator can probably confirm that, but I can speak to any questions you have on the adjournment.
All right, just to confirm, Mr. Falsetto obviously is aware then that there is a request for adjournment sine die. And Ms. Gilbert, were you aware that the applicant, or did they mention they were not coming today?
Yes, there is email correspondence that was sent to the coordinator that they are in agreement with both the adjournment, and they asked if they didn't need to attend today. So,
all right, in that case, I think we can just go out to the public on this and then make a decision. So thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Anyone in the audience or online want to speak to an adjournment request sine die for 97 McLaren? Not seeing anybody come forward, then members of the panel, all those in favor? All right, so for the record, the application is adjourned sine die. Thank you very much, Ms. Gilbert. Okay, the next one is 582 Mariposa Avenue. And I think Mr. Penn is who I'm looking for.
We do have an email saying the agent won't be attending. They're in agreement with sine die.
All right, well then, we're not asking any questions. So anybody in the audience want to speak to the adjournment sine die? Anyone online? Now's your chance. All right, so I think we can move to a vote on this. Panel members, all those in favor? All right, so for the record, 582 Mariposa Avenue is adjourned sine die. All right. 258 Montfort Street, looking for Mr. Yalkatsi. Do we know if Mr. Yalkatsi is online? He doesn't appear to be with us today.
No, Madam Chair, I don't see him online. Oh, he's joining now.
Ah, okay.
Hi,
Good afternoon, Mr. Yalkatsi.
good afternoon.
You're aware of the adjournment request?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair, and we're in agreement with the adjournment request. We need another minor variance. Thank you.
All right, and so this is an adjournment sine die?
Yes.
All right. Okay, any questions for Mr. Yalkatsi from the panel members? No? Okay. Anyone in the audience or online want to speak to this adjournment request for 258 Montfort Street, sine die adjournment? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody, so all those in favor? Okay, so for the record, you are adjourned sine die, Mr. Yalkatsi. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, let's go back then, since it seems we have a pattern going today, to 469 Wilbrod. Did Mr. View join?
No, I don't see him. If he could raise his hand if he's online, we'll move him in.
Okay,
No, not seeing him.
okay. In that case, anyone in the audience or online want to speak to an adjournment sine die for 469 Wilbrod Street? No? All right, members of the panel, let's make a decision. All those in favor? Okay, so for the record, 469 Wilbrod Street is adjourned sine die. All right. That brings us to the last one, which is not on my list, but who we want to speak with the agent. So looking for either Mr. or Mrs. McGarry on 30 Beckwith. Come on down. Good afternoon. Okay, so just for the record, you just give us your name so that it's on the recording.
I'm Amanda McGarry.
Connor McGarry.
Okay, perfect. So the reason I've called you down is because we had a chance to look at your application and we saw that staff has some concerns. They have concerns about functionality for one, with regards to the reduction in the parking space. And we are wondering whether or not you would maybe benefit by having another couple of weeks to talk with staff about maybe redesigning, something you might be able to do to make it work a little better. Had you thought about that?
I think the concern from staff, we're talking about a total of 15 centimeters. One of their concerns was from a neighboring property and whether the opening of a car door would infringe. Last night, a letter was submitted by the adjacent property owner indicating that they had, and I have copies in case, I know it was sent last minute last night, indicating that they had no concerns with any infringement on their property. In fact, they didn't feel like it would infringe at all. And I think I would also submit that even under the applicable bylaw, the 2.6 meter width is still smaller than an average width with car doors open. So the 15 centimeters that we're requesting is sort of inconsequential at this point. It doesn't make a material difference. I'm not sure if there is room to further discuss with the planner. I don't know if we're able to amend at this point. So maybe I'll leave it there and turn it back to you and see if that sort of alleviates your concerns with the letter and that submission.
So I guess I was just, wondering whether or not you, we understand your objective, but had you look at other designs possibly at the house where you might be able to, create an addition that wouldn't cause this kind of this concern?
We did look at that. Unfortunately, it doesn't give us, just with the design of the property layout, it doesn't give us the amount of space necessary. This proposal is looking to go off the side of the house in order to add a mudroom. Without the addition off the side, that only leaves out the back. And as you can imagine, a mudroom out the back of a house is less desirable than, say, the side entrance.
All right, in that case, we will hear the application. So thanks for your time. I just wanted to explore that with you.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
So putting that back onto our agenda. Thank you. With that, then, I think we can start with back to, oh, no, we have our fast tracks. Let's get those done. It was always nice to see that there's some applications that are completely unopposed and that that we can deal with relatively quickly. So let's go to number 4, which is 233 Gilmour Street. Mr. or Mrs. Gibson is the agent. Do we have that person online? Suzanne Gibson. Have we got Miss Gibson? All right.
Sorry, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. I just,
Excellent.
good. Glad to-
There's
I had no idea where you were. So, so welcome this afternoon.
Thank you.
So with this, we have no presentation. We have no questions really at this point. It's very clear and straightforward for us. So I'm just going to give one last opportunity to staff, or sorry, not to staff, to the panel members. No additional questions. Not seeing any. So we're going to go straight to the public portion. I don't believe I have anybody. There's no speakers on this. So with that, then anyone in the audience or online like to speak to this application for 233 Gilmour Street? Permission application. All right, not seeing anybody come forward. In that case, I think we can go straight to a vote on this. Members of the panel, all those in favor? All right, so for the record, your application is unanimously granted. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see, I think the other one is, sorry, 484 Kenwood. So I think I missed one, number 3. So for that one, we're looking for Larocque, agent? Richard Larocque?
He's online.
All right.
Hello, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. So again, we're going to fast track this one. So we have no real questions for you. Everything is pretty straightforward in the file. And we've had a look at the planning staff's comments. All seems to be in order. There's no concerns there. So just to the committee members, want to make sure there's no questions have come up since the last time we talked about this application. Seeing no one nodding, we're going to go straight to the public portion on this then. There's no speakers that are registered. That said, is there anyone who would have an interest in 484 Kenwood Avenue? It's for a minor variance, and it's a very minor variance. All right, I'm not seeing anybody come forward, so members of the panel, all those in favor? All right, so for the record, your application is unanimously granted. Thank you very much. Mr.
Excellent.
Larocque.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye now. The next one, 62 Stirling Avenue. Looking for Ms. Sanford.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Hold on. I'm just trying to turn on my camera here.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I don't see you.
Start video. There we go. There,
All right.
now you
so-
can.
Good afternoon. So, Ms.
afternoon.
Sanford, we're not looking for a presentation. We don't have any questions. Again, this is a very simple application. It's
Yes,
for
it is.
easement for stormwater. So with that, then I'm just going to give our members of the panel a chance unless somebody has something that came to mind. Not seeing any questions on this. I also have no speakers listed. I do see that there's 2 conditions. Are we good with the conditions, Ms. Sanford?
Yes, we are.
All right. In that case, is there anyone in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application for an easement at 62 Stirling? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone come forward. So with that, members of the panel, all those in favor? Okay, for the record, the application is unanimously granted. Thank you, Ms. Sanford.
Thank you very much.
All right. So the last one on the fast track that we've got is for 288 Clemow Avenue. I believe that's application number, is it 12 or 13? The number is a little it's number 12. Okay, there we go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, Mr. Sir, can you just present yourself and the person that's with you?
Yep. So Urgent Sewer address is 240 Michael Copeland Drive. And with me is my colleague Ryan Polton, both with Novatech.
All right, perfect. So again, no presentation. There's, I'm just going to make one last call to members of our panel. Any questions come to mind on this? Yes, Member Blatherwick.
And my question is to planning staff. The rooftop patio that's being is shown in the new construction. Does that patio meet the zoning bylaw requirements?
Thank you for your question. It's staff's opinion, based on our high level review, that it will meet the bylaw requirements.
Okay, so all the setbacks are met.
Should be.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, any other questions? Nope. Okay. So with that, then, no one on my speakers list for this application. We're going to make a call out. Is there anyone in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application at 288 Clemow? Very simple application again. All right, I'm not seeing anybody come forward. So with that, then, members of the panel, I think we're ready to make a decision on this. So all those in favor? All right, for the record, the application is unanimously granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. All right, thank you. Okay, so let's see, where are we here? We've got, that doesn't leave us with an awful lot of applications. Let's see, what's gone? All right, so we have 4 applications that are left on this. Let's go with number 1, which is for 275 King Edward Avenue. We're looking for Mr. Jacobs.
Good afternoon. You all right?
Good afternoon, Mr. Jacobs. Sorry, Mr. Jacobs, we can't hear you. Still unable to hear you.
How about now?
Perfect.
Perfect. Too many options I had.
I know the feeling. Okay, so with this application, then we're just going to. It's a fairly straightforward application. My understanding, in fact, is one of the reasons why we're not fast tracking is because there has been some concerns raised. Are you aware of that, Mr.?
Yes, there was one letter submitted asking some questions with respect to the guest traffic and parking, and also potential concern if was this going to be converted to a homeless shelter, I believe is kind of the gist of the commentary. And with respect to the parking issue, certainly there is the proposal meets the city's parking requirements as far as on-site parking, and we do not anticipate any overflow parking onto the street because they can be accommodated in the underground garage. With respect to the long-term plan, it's certainly my client's intention to operate a hotel. So I can't comment further on what long-term things might happen, but certainly the intent is to operate it as a legitimate hotel business.
All right, let's just be clear then. So this application before us today is for an easement and an easement only.
That's
and
correct.
It's an easement that is in fact a condition of an Ontario Land Tribunal settlement, if we understood that correctly.
That's correct.
And that there's already an approved site plan for that hotel. So issues with regards to parking and traffic and all of that's already been addressed as part of the site plan process?
That's correct.
All right, so really you're essentially trying to meet the conditions of that site plan in order to implement. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Jacobs? I think that pretty much sums up what our understanding was on this application. Okay. All right, and who do we have on staff? Ms. Linker, anything additionally that we should be aware of?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe you have it all covered.
All right, well then with that, I think we're going to go to our speakers list, which we do have a speaker with us today, I believe. Must be, let's see, are you Mr. Moreau?
Yes, hi.
Okay. All right, so with that then, I think, so we're going to go with our speakers list first. I just assumed that it was because you came down. All right, so Mr. Moreau?
Well, I just heard Mr. Jacobs' replies to the concern that as a resident of the neighborhood we have. I just want to also counterbalance any opposition from any residents around, knowing that we live in a neighborhood that has some issues due to the addiction shelter that is in the vicinity. But I think that having a commercial, an additional hotel long term there and additional business would be actually a very good voice for our neighborhood to ensure that we solve all the issues that this creates in our neighborhood. So I'm always thinking when I'm not sure what the other speakers going to go for if they are opposite to the, but I just want them like be careful what you wish for because you may get it. And I would say that it's certainly better to have a serious business coming here than to keep this no man's land that has very little value due to the vicinity of this addiction shelter. So as a resident and very close and maybe affected, I'm absolutely for this this plan, and I want to say that I have no personal interest except supporting something that can be beneficial for our neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Moreau. And so I guess there's no questions from our panel members, Mr. Moreau? No? All right. Okay, so that brings us to, and that is the extent of my speakers list. So again, would you mind just for the record to state your name and your municipal address?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last name is Polowin, Polowin. First name Jacob. I'm with Gowling WLG. Our municipal address is 160 Elgin, and I am counsel for Madame Gregoire, who's the adjacent landowner and the dominant tenement for the purpose of the easement. And I'm just confirming that this is, as Mr. Jacobs said, to implement a settlement between my client and Mr. Jacobs' client. We reviewed, and my client's in favor of the application.
Perfect. Any questions for Mr. Polowin? No? All right. Thank you. So is there anyone else in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application for 275 King Edward? It's for an easement. All right, I'm not seeing anyone else come forward, so I guess at this point we can go to a vote. And let me just have a look. Is there any conditions that we need to worry about? No. All right, let's go to a vote. All those in favor? Okay, for the record, the application is unanimously granted. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee.
All right. Okay, so that then takes us to let's go back then to 30 Beckwith. Mr. and Mrs. McGarry, and come back.
Good afternoon once again, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. All right, so I think, so we're not going to ask for a presentation, but we do want you to explain the functionality on site for us, because we are a little worried about we see this as a fairly substantial reduction in the size of a legal parking space on your property. And for us, it's a concern that we have to look at sort of property, in all time, in infinite time. So there could be changes of landowners next door to you, that kind of thing. So having, somebody next door who's saying no issues for us, that's not it's not all that comforting because
Fair enough.
we know that there can always be future landowners who won't feel that way. So, so if you wouldn't mind, just tell us about that functionality and how you see how it'll work.
Yes, most certainly. So, as you know, many downtown homes are decades, if not centuries old. For some reason, homes back then were much smaller and maybe not designed with the sort of new age family in mind. So to that end, our home now currently has no entryway to speak of. There's sort of a front door that abuts right into the living room. There is a very small one-door afterthought closet that it is added in the front. We're a young family with 2 children, which I would submit is sort of the norm as our neighborhood turns over and more young families move in. We live houses down from a huge park, from Brantwood Park, so many families are interested in moving into the area. in order to stay in this downtown area, we do need some sort of functional entryway and mudroom. As I'm sure many people here can say, children come with hockey equipment and winter gear and skis and swim bags, and we have nowhere to put that, notwithstanding whether guests come over and there's nowhere to store sort of their coats and boots as they come in. So we're really purporting to add a mudroom, and as I said before, it will be out the side of the house. So that is the reason that we're seeking the variance.
And so you're effectively cutting off access to your garage in the back. And so just tell us what the use of that garage is going to become then.
The way the design is currently designed, it will still leave a pathway that's long enough, and we ensured that it was long enough to get things out like bikes, snow blowers, etc. It's currently not used as a parking space for our car anyway. So we did ensure that we're leaving enough of a space out to get many of the items that are stored there out.
So is the garage going to then become a large, no, because it won't be a garage anymore. You won't be able to call it a garage because it's not going to have a car in it. So is it become a storage shed? And then I guess I'm going to have some questions for our planner to see, you know, how that then affects the conformity with the zoning bylaw. Have you had those chats?
We did chat with, and actually I'll maybe turn to my husband, we did chat with the city. However, that concern wasn't voiced at the time.
All right, so is this Ms. Linker on this application? Yes, Ms. Linker. So, you know, that garage changes use, obviously. And the only thing I can think of is it becomes an accessory structure on the site. So did you look at that in terms of its then conformity to the zoning bylaw?
Thank you for your question, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that the detached garage under the zoning bylaw is looked at as an accessory structure, and it would align with the same provisions under the zoning bylaw as if it was a storage shed.
Even from a size standpoint?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, good to know. Just don't want to be creating another problem that we haven't dealt with while we're here. So
We'd like to
that's
tick as many boxes as we
Okay.
can in this. So.
Excellent. Okay, well, that's my questions. Member Blatherwick, Member Lecuyer? Yes, go ahead.
If we could have the site plan for the proposal put up on the screen, please. I have a question for staff. That's not the one is that the one that's in my package?
I think there could be numerous in your package. If you tell us the appendix number, we might be able to.
It's labeled as sheet number A001.
That's it.
Yeah, the exhibits on this, oh, that's it right there, yeah. The exhibits on the screen, I just flipped the submitted new exhibits and I flipped the orientation of the page only. That's the only difference.
Okay, so for Ms. Linker, and I'm looking at a Google shot of the existing house and then the site plan that came in the package we received. Am I incorrect in assuming that the front wall of the house has now been extended towards the closer towards the property line?
Thank you for your question. It's my understanding that the front wall of the house is not moving closer to the property line. The applicant might be able to confirm that. It was my understanding that this was just a rear and interior side yard addition. I believe the front deck is already pre-existing. I might allow the applicant to confirm
So if
that.
that's so Ms. Linker, if that's not a physical extension of the front wall of the house, then we're not creating an illegal parking space, i.e. front yard parking.
Thank you for the question. So the front yard parking space would only be triggered if the parking space was located between the front wall of the house and the front lot line. If it's located behind the front wall of the house, which they're proposing to do, it would not be considered front yard parking. That would be, they're reducing the length of the parking space to, I think it's 4 meters, and
Yes,
close
two,
to-
yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, 4.32 by 2.45 meters.
and if it was the full 5.2 meters, it would be considered front yard parking, as part of the parking space would be located partially in the front yard.
So the reduction in the size of the parking space gets us away from an additional variance.
That's correct. Instead of having a parking space length variance, they would have had a front yard parking variance.
So, Ms. Linker, we are concerned because it seems to me that, depending on, I mean, to your planning report, there's a functionality issue because we're reducing the length of that parking space, the legal length, considerably. So, maybe the car that Mr. and Mrs. Gary drive fits within that. But if the property were sold for whatever reason, and the next owner came in and had a pickup truck, then they would possibly be illegally parked in the front of the house, and then they would be subject to bylaw infractions, would they not?
Thank you for the question. So the owners would be establishing a parking space of that length and width, and it's my understanding that if the car is not able to fit in that space, then it would be parking in the driveway and not in the legal parking space. I think that would create an issue, but staff did have concerns that this would inherently result in front yard parking.
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing too, is that no matter which way you cut this, that's going to be the end result and so it would have almost been better to have a minor variance to allow for because of this, so reduce the size, but to ensure that there isn't infractions to the zoning bylaw by having the permission to do front facing parking or front parking.
Is it not, is that concern not alleviated by just granting the variance that grants? So essentially, I think what we're asking is for a variance to allow for a smaller size front yard or side parking space.
So it won't be an issue as long as the car is always small enough to fit in within that legal dimension. But if you're ever into a situation where, the ownership changes 20 years from now, and now you've got somebody who drives something that's larger and doesn't fit within that length. Now that person is doing something illegal, which is front yard parking. So we would be enabling that essentially through a decision to allow for that kind of reduction. So what the committee was thinking was recognizing this is a special circumstance. Maybe the better option would have been to have the 2 minor variances so that at least if there was an issue with regards to vehicle length within that legal that now reduced parking space, that then at least you would have that permission and you wouldn't be facing like the possibility of a zoning infraction on that.
Maybe, can I just ask a question to clarify? So if in that future instance and someone, had the very large van or truck and they received a parking infraction, would their defense not be to show that their side parking space allowance is now, I guess, legally non-conforming based on a previous owner's minor variance?
No, because you wouldn't have legal non-conforming at that point because the intent is you are going to conform to the zoning bylaw. So there is no illegalness happening in what you're doing. So if they were to park though a larger vehicle in the future and they were the principal owners of the residence and that was their, their legal parking and they couldn't fit in it, then because what we're understanding is, of course, that the length is to meet exactly where the front face of the house is, which makes sense. But a larger vehicle would automatically be parking beyond that wall, and so therefore in the front yard. So that's the issue, because right now the zoning bylaw doesn't allow for that. That's why people ask for zoning amendments or variances in order to allow that.
How come you would have seen in our package, we had numerous examples of driveways that don't conform with the current bylaw. So how does that permit it? Even if, for example, the neighbor on our other side of our house, their driveway width is only 2.26 meters wide.
I can't speak to that. I don't know what the rules were. Maybe they do have legal non-conforming rights based on, having been there before the bylaw was in place, or So I really can't speak to those circumstances because you're
Fair
asking us to make a decision on your property.
Fair enough.
So-
I guess maybe to that, we would just say that there is significant precedent within our neighborhood where people either have non-conforming driveways or variances that have been granted. There's numerous examples in our 1 block radius.
Okay. All right. So I'm not the only one with questions. So
Fair enough.
I believe, sorry, Ms. Linker, you've got a question too. So I'm not sure whose hand up was first. Was it Member de Cailly? Or was it? Oh, no. So sorry, it's my mistake. I guess with the, I didn't have gallery view, so I couldn't quite see. So, all right, Ms. Linker, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to recognize that if the minor variance is granted, I think that that variance would live with the land. However, staff's concerned is that the parking space, although it's legally established in the side yard through the minor variance, they wouldn't need to close their private approach because they have a legal parking space on site. It would just be used inappropriately in the future if there was a car that couldn't fit in that parking space, or as staff have concerns that it would just be easier to navigate in a car in the front yard than in their established parking space. And that's, I guess, the summary of our concerns is that it would legalize a parking space. It wouldn't lose its rights if somebody buys a bigger vehicle. It would be used incorrectly.
I'm not sure I followed that completely, Ms. Linker, so I may actually need you to sort of re-summarize that for me.
Sorry, so if they did get a bigger vehicle, they still have a legal parking space in the interior side yard through or by way of minor variance. So they wouldn't have to close their private approach. They would still be allowed a driveway to that legal parking space, but they would just be using it inappropriately by parking in the front yard rather than their legal space in the interior side yard.
Okay, but the question is if they are actually beyond the front while parked to the extent that they can, and that they have a portion of the vehicle that's in the front yard, are they not then open to a zoning infraction because they're front yard parking?
It's my understanding that it wouldn't necessarily be a zoning infraction, but it would just be used inappropriately because the car is supposed to fit in that reduced parking space. So it would just create opportunities for the car to be parked in the front yard.
Okay, so no bylaw compliance issues.
It's my understanding that it wouldn't be a compliance issue. It would just be inappropriate for them to instead park in the front yard if the car can't fit.
Okay, that's a different scenario. Then we don't have a problem. Okay. Member de Cailly, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm just making sure I'm following. At what point does it start to become front yard parking? And where is kind of that line? And I'm wondering if the applicant has any pictures of in their presentation that shows kind of where that line is, or maybe Ms. Linker. Because I didn't find in the application if the plans were there, but it wasn't clear exactly what was old versus new. I think I could figure it out from the addition that was being asked on the side, but in terms of like the parking spot, that wasn't as clear for me. So perhaps there is some clarity in that presentation.
Are you looking, Ms. Dickey, you're looking for a response from staff or from the applicants?
Well, let's start with the applicant, because I saw in the PowerPoint that was in the documents that there's some pictures, so maybe we can start there.
All right, if we can have that presentation brought up, please.
And maybe if we could have the same picture, it was the A001 on the side brought up as we did before. I think it's exhibit, is it D? Yes, so the red portion on this drawing is the parking space, and everything else with that wider outline is structure. The widest outline is the existing dwelling, and the sort of lesser wide outline, sorry, this is hard to describe this picture, but the lesser wide outline is the proposed addition to the structure.
I think it says that on that, but was your question more around where is the current parking spot?
Well, my understanding is that the parking goes all the way along the side of the house and there's a garage at the back. Is that correct?
Yes, so it would be, if you could see that second largest outline, that's the proposed addition. So that is not existent currently. So that thickest outline, that's basically just that one square. That's our our house now. As you can see, it's not that large. So that's what exists so far.
And the current legal, I think, well, Ms. Linker might be able to speak to this
Mhm.
particularly, but I believe the current legal spot is behind the house. We currently do not have legally conforming front side parking. It's actually behind the house.
Yeah, so that'd be great if Miss Linker could jump in here, just so that I understand the difference between what front yard parking is versus not. Like, is this a matter of, if the car went past the front deck on this plan, that becomes front yard parking? That would help. That clarity would help me.
Thank you for the question. So the area highlighted in red is the required full length of the parking space. The area that they are requesting relief from is where the thick line of the existing building front wall is. Anything in front of that front wall would be front yard parking. So even that portion that is aligned with the deck is considered front yard parking.
Okay. And I think was it the fifth that we mentioned at the beginning? The applicant mentioned something about it's a 15 centimeters.
It's 15 centimeters wide, the difference between what we're requesting and what's required, and 88 centimeters in length. So that distance past that thick front wall line is 88 centimeters.
Okay. Thank you for that clarity. And I can't hear you. Is your speaker on?
He's gonna get battery. Oh,
Yep.
I'm back.
That works.
I'm back, whatever. I didn't touch anything. I swear I didn't touch anything. So, okay. So, but the question I have now is, imagine, so we've got a parking space that's now, significantly reduced. And you have a door that literally is right at the front end of that parking space. So theoretically, wouldn't you need to have almost the bumper of your car touching that front door? How's that going to work? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I have to do the door would have to swing, I guess, inward.
Swing inward, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we already have that in our plan. I don't think that's in here, but I think we already had, is it? I think the door swings,
yeah, it is.
the door swings inward if you go to A101. I don't know if we need to put it up, but the door does swing inward for that reason.
All right, I'm going to ask Ms. Linker then on this. So again, and I know you have concerns about functionality, and I'm beginning to see, really why, because isn't that the case then that the car would literally have to be parked nose to the addition, the front of the addition?
Thank you for your question. It's my understanding that if the car space is reduced, then if their car is exactly that length, then it would need to abut directly up against the house. If the car is a little bit smaller, they might have a little bit of room, depending on what kind of car is owned by the current owner.
So if in fact they wanted to leave, I don't know, 2 feet so that they could actually enter into the mudroom, is there, it's hard to answer this question, but is it likely that they would then automatically be partially parking in the front yard?
If the car then would be parked in front of the front wall, even if that's aligned with the deck or beyond the deck, then that would count as front yard parking.
If it might alleviate any of the panel's concerns, we already, with the number of children and things we have, are very good at pulling in, doing a big unload, and then fully parking. So even with moving the car twice to get it into a parking spot, that is something we are very well versed in.
All right, okay. I don't know that everybody would be willing to do that though, as
I just have a question, because even if it was 5.2 meters is the legal length that's required, if I owned a truck, it'd be longer than 5.2 meters. So is that not the same issue? Like,
yeah, we would be faced with exactly the same issue. You're quite
even though
right with that.
even though we'd have even though we'd have a driveway, that's the parking spot, that's the required size for the bylaw.
So here's the thing though. So the very reason why we're looking at reducing that parking spot is because you can't make it work. It would, otherwise that car would be, so there is no creating a legal parking space in the dimensions of the bylaw, the way that addition is proposed. So the reason why we have to reduce the parking space dimensions is in order to create something that can be considered legal under the bylaw. But it's one thing to do that. It's another thing for it to be practical and actual functioning.
And I'm just saying that the existing bylaw itself is not necessarily practical. Like a 2.6 meter wide driveway, you're not going to pull a car up and open two doors, right? And in a modern car, the average car length, the doors alone are 6 feet plus the car width, right? So the existing bylaw is not functional itself. I guess that's not the issue here, so, but.
You can raise that. There's a zoning bylaw review going on if you want to raise that, you know, you're quite welcome to. It's not something we can deal with, right? For us, we just have to go by what it is. And our assumption, of course, is that they've looked at different vehicle makes and models to make sure that that makes sense in the greater context of things. I'd hate to think that we're designing a zoning bylaw on the basis of pickup trucks and their requirements. But okay, but your point's taken, I understand. I see Member Lecky has another question, so we'll go to Member Lecky.
Yeah, so my question is for the applicants to clarify if there were other design considerations that explored all of these kind of options. You landed on this one. This is the one that you ended up putting forward, but were there other ones that were going to achieve the goals that you're trying to do here, but didn't get put forward?
Yes, thank you for your question. We explored many design options. Unfortunately, going out the side, as I previously mentioned, was sort of the only way we were going to get that functional mudroom. Going out the back and having a mudroom out the back is just not desirable. And just with the way our property line runs, no matter how we went out the side, it did create this issue. We did want to leave at least some side parking so that we were trying to be in as aligned with the bylaw as possible. As you can see, there would be room to even come more forward, and we decided to put forward a design that went forward up the side as minimally as possible, but still gave us enough room to be able to have a functional entryway.
And so if it's not approved today, what would you be redesigning it otherwise? And
that's literally the $1 million question. Yeah. I'm to be frank, to draw up these designs was quite a significant figure, and that is something we would have to revisit.
Because I'm no architect, I have no skills in this area, so I'm just looking at these plans and I'm like, why didn't they do it this way, or but I mean, I don't understand functionality. Obviously, there's so much goes, and people are paid a lot more money than I am to look at this. I just was kind of like, man, is there a way to make this work so that everyone is happy?
Yes.
And if you tell me, yeah, we tried it all, this is the only way, this is the closest thing, then that would just help me understand. Versus, you know what, we can go back to the drawing board and try something different.
Yeah, I know I sort of gave you a broad answer. If you have specifics of why we didn't do one thing versus the other, I'm sure I have an answer. But I do say that we tried numerous designs, and this sort of was able to maximize our space while avoiding seeking other more major, or what we think are more major variances, or kept us as in line with the rules as possible.
So yeah, I guess when I'm looking at the two, I'm looking at A001 and A101. And so it's that kind of weird L shape that is kind of what seems to be the issue of not giving enough parking length before it considers front yard parking. So I'm like looking at, I'm like, well, what if the mudroom was, but you guys, I think you mentioned at the beginning that you don't want to block, like you want people to be able to get to the backyard, like, you know, whether it's garbage cans or sports equipment or a snow blower, right? Like that's why you're not fully going all the way out, right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
And we also wanted to create an addition. I mean, like everyone, we're sort of working on a budget. We also wanted to create an addition. And also we love our house. We wanted to maintain and sort of pay homage to the existing structure. So to do the minimal amount of sort of moving of walls on the inside, that was another impetus for how we landed on this design.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that.
If you look at the outside, it's really pretty.
Right. So Member Blatherwick, any questions for staff on this?
No.
All right. So I do though, Ms. Linker. So I'm circling back to front yard parking and an amendment for that. Had you considered that as a means for dealing with this? It would certainly give the applicants a little bit more room with regards to functionality. So just wanted your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Correct me if I'm wrong, during pre-consultation, I think that we did discuss kind of the different possibilities and the different minor variances that might have been associated with this application. And I was expressing that staff would have concerns about a proposal for front yard parking, and it's up to the applicant of how they'd like to apply. We'd be raising different concerns if this was a front yard parking proposal.
All right, so still concerns even if we said, look, let's just adjourn and add that. All right.
Is it possible to hear the front yard parking concerns? Like if that's something we can address now, we'd be happy to do so.
So our concern is no matter what, you're going to wind up in a front yard parking situation. So even if we do approve this, there'll be some non-compliance. So the only other way to ensure full compliance is to add a front yard parking variance. So two variances, one to reduce the area. Now, I guess we could look at whether or not it would have to be both. It would be probably a reduction and the front yard parking. So that's what, we're kind of thinking is how do we sort of make this work? Because I did notice that there's a lot of architectural drawings in here. So it's very clear that there's been a lot of money spent already on getting that design ready. So do you, by any chance in your presentation, also have pictures of your neighbors and how they park? And I guess the issue is sometimes, yeah, so I'm sort of backpedaling a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Because sometimes you can see pictures and people, so each house has to have a legal parking space, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people park in it. So just the same way that, it might be your case, but it would be really difficult to say to somebody who has, well, it might come down to the same thing, but let's see your pictures and see what you've got.
So we've included pictures of both other non-complying parking spaces in the one radius. We've also included a picture of our street just on a casual, I think it was a Wednesday night, just to show how people traditionally park in our street, to show that even if these houses do have complying parking spots, they're not used. I would also submit, and I know legally it makes a difference, but majority of the people in our neighborhood are at least 2-car families. So there is always a car in the front. I know, of course, there might be one in the proper spot and then that allows for one in the front. But if the purpose of the bylaw is sort of an aesthetic, eye-pleasing street, even just having the second car sort of negates that purpose, as does the allowed street parking on our street. I'll also add that we're a one-car family, and we have a commitment to remaining as such for reasons that belong in another meeting. But we even, you know, I would submit that our car, even if there was a giant pickup truck that hung out sort of X centimeters, that is sort of more aesthetically pleasing than the two-car families with one car in the front yard, or the people that just park on a regular basis in the non-complying way. And if you turn to Appendix E of our submissions, is that picture of our Wednesday night street. So these are the non-complying, and then this is our street. Sorry.
That's Burnham. That's the street over, and then the next picture is our street, where you can see all the cars in the front yard.
And your house is essentially lined up this in the same, so your front wall is essentially the same alignment as these ones?
This is actually across the street from us. So it's Beckwith, the other side of the road, but yes, same usual setback as the other houses on our street.
All right, okay. Okay, I think I have a much better idea. So, members of the panel, any further questions on this?
Yeah, one for me. Just sorry, keep the presentation up because I think, I don't know, pictures really speak. And if we could go to slide 17 of the presentation. Yeah. So in this one, I kind of see it analogous of what you're trying to achieve, right? Because you're kind of going side out. And so if Miss Linker's here, if she could pop on and just clarify for me. So if this car here, you know, it's a Toyota, looks rather small. I'm not a car person. Maybe it's a Matrix. I have no idea. But just at what point does it become front yard parking? Is it the edge of the porch? Is it the edge of the house? I'm just kind of curious of that as an example.
Thank you for the question. It would be the front wall of the house. So that is not including the porch. It would be the wall that the front door is on.
Okay, so kind of where that eaves trough may be, depending on, so it's hard to tell with just one angle. Okay.
Very analogous though, exactly.
Yeah, that's why
our
that's
situation.
Street behind us.
That's a house is pretty much immediately behind our house.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
I would also submit, I know the front line of the dwelling is, for all intents and purposes, how we measure where front yard parking begins. But I think in terms of the purpose of the bylaw, incorporating the front yard porch sort of makes an aesthetic difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Ms. Linker, can you also clarify? So I think on their street, there's a sidewalk. And then there's, I guess, parts of the driveway. And then there's the actual like parking spot. So is that how it works from a planning perspective? Is that like maybe there's a garage, there's a parking spot, there's this other land, and then there's where apparently that would be front yard parking, and then there's a sidewalk. Am I understanding the different parts of this length correctly?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure if it'll be easier to explain over the site plan, but front yard parking would be considered anywhere between the front lot line of the property and the front wall of the house, if the proposed parking space limits are within that area.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think that wraps up our questions. Ms. Linker, any final words from you before we go to the public?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if we discussed too much on the parking space width, but staff did have concerns just about that door swing. As mentioned in the staff report, it is contemplated elsewhere in the bylaw for a 2.4 meter wide parking space to be located in a parking garage or parking lot, but that's only where the parking space is not located next to a beam or next to a wall that would obstruct the door swing of the car. So staff believe that the door swing would be obstructed by the door and then also would encroach onto the neighbor's property. I don't believe that those concerns were raised, so just wanted to repeat those.
All right, thank you for that. Now, we do see that. Yeah, good catch on that for us. Okay, with that then, my speakers list, I don't believe we have anyone on this one. Just give me a moment. All right, no, I don't have anybody on my speakers list. So is there anyone in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application? Hello.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Jacob Olduke, Foten Planning and Design. I'll be brief. I didn't sign up. I think this is the first time I'm actually literally just an interested party. And I think this was a really interesting discussion. And we have a lot of similar files where it comes to the discussion of front yard parking. If I may, one thing I just wanted to offer to the discussion that wasn't raised was the location of the front wall of the building with respect to the front yard setback. So we had a similar file one time where it came down to the solution being to add more building in order to move the front wall so that all of a sudden the parking space became length compliant. And we felt that it was sort of a strange situation whereby building an addition to the front of the house, maybe enclosing the porch, it rectifies the variance, but doesn't necessarily make for better development. And so when you have a legal parking space, you can also park in the driveway. I would hazard a guess that, as discussed, most people parking in their driveway don't park exactly in the box that would be defined unless you have a garage. So in balancing the addition that they are proposing versus, again, just looking at the plans briefly, if they were to enclose that porch and then possibly build another porch and move that building closer to the street, reducing green space, they could become technically compliant. And I don't know if that's necessarily a better solution than allowing for a reduced length parking space that matches what I would see as a very similar streetscape condition. Those are just my comments. Again, I haven't been retained by anybody. I just thought it was a very interesting discussion. Thank you.
We appreciate that, Mr. Velduke, and you did raise a really good point. So, I mean, the next area to explore then, Ms. Linker, is how much room would there, like, just hypothetically, how much room would there be between the existing front face of the house to the front yard or setback requirement? Do we know that offhand?
Thank you for your question. If you'd like, I can briefly look that up to see if I can find that answer.
And maybe while she's,
Yeah, so what is the front yard setback requirement? It's an interesting twist on it, which is.
Yes, I was just going to add,
good for
and this sort of loops in a previous member question, is in our design, this was something we talked about with the designer, but to the point of my new friend who appeared here today, we've never met. We didn't want to lose our front yard. We just thought having beautiful green space in the front of the street is very important, and that's why we decided to go forward with this design and didn't pursue having the variance in another way insofar as we needed to seek the variance for the setback from the property line.
All right, thank you. Ms. Linker, any luck?
Thanks for the question. I believe the R1 TT zone allows a front yard setback minimum of 3 meters unless the average of the abutting neighbors is less than that. Their current front yard setback on their plans, I believe, is 7.38 meters. So they, I believe, have about 4 meters, maybe more to work with if the abutting neighbors align with that.
All right, I see that. That's good. Yeah, so there would be room if you wanted to play that game. You could in fact create a legal parking space next to the house without being front yard parking. So good food for thought. Thank you, Mr. Velduke, for that. All right, anyone else like to speak to this application either for or against? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody come forward. So we're going to give you 2 minutes to recap and then we'll go from there.
So I think in closing, we would just like the committee to know that neither my husband nor I are originally from Ottawa. We fell in this love with this city and we knew we wanted to raise our family here. We love our neighborhood. We really enjoy our neighbors. And we request this minor variance in order to create what we think is a very livable space, both for us and any future inhabitants to our neighborhood. It's a functional family home. It'll beautify our street and our neighborhood. And it's also, and I think this is very important, in line with the residential characteristic of the Brantwood Park area, both in terms of the parking it creates or doesn't create, and also the overall aesthetic appeal to the neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I am going to guess that we're reserving on this. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right, so you will get the decision in 10 days. But I think there's a lot for us to be thinking about, and sometimes, you know, it just gives us that extra time to be thinking through some of the implications. So we're going to reserve.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us down to our two last applications, which is for 150 Lyman and 577 Melbourne. For both, we're going to request presentations. So let's start then with 150 Lyman Street. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I want to make sure, hang on. All right, so you are
Shireen Roshanafshar.
Yes, okay, thank you. And with you is
my husband,
Jordan Joannis.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, do you have a presentation for us too? Okay, let's have a look at your presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and panel members. My name is Shireen Roshanafshar and I'm here with my husband, Jordan Joannis, presenting to you our own minor variance application for 150 Lyman Street. Next slide, please. We propose an attached garage facing the front, which doesn't comply with the streetscape character. We plan to build our dream family home at 150 Lyman. It's just the two of us for now, but we're expecting our first child in the spring. We love this neighborhood and would love to build a forever home for our growing young family. We have consulted with the city, community association, and ward councillor, and none had any objections to our plans. Additionally, we dropped by all 32 properties on Lyman and Mulvey Hill to chat with the neighbors regarding our plans. Those who were not home, we left letters with our contact information and our future plans. Everyone else we talked to was very supportive of our application, and we believe that you have received at least 6 letters of support and 1 phone call of support from our neighbors on Lyman and Mulvey Hill. Next slide, please. The area is in the Westboro neighborhood, and we are current residents of the neighborhood with deep roots in the neighborhood for generations. Next slide, please. The current property, as you see in the picture, is a single detached home with a detached garage in the back. Next slide, please. Regarding the streetscape character analysis, Lyman Street has 16 houses on it. And as you see in this image, yellow represents carports and attached garages, pink represents driveway parking, and blue represents detached garages in the rear yard. Detached garages are the dominant character of the street. We have also expanded the view here to include the north side of Mulvey Hill Street, which is directly south of Lyman. Although we know that our application is assessed purely upon its own merit, we want to mention that 153 Mulvey Hill, which is street right behind us, was granted a variance for a front-facing garage by the committee last year. Next slide, please. We also did a slightly wider analysis on Wesley Avenue, which is a nearby and comparable street south of Byron running between Kirkwood and Hilson, where the dominant character is indeed an attached carport. Next slide, please. So this is our proposed build. We aim to build a two-story detached home with a secondary basement dwelling and an attached garage facing the front, which does not comply with the streetscape character. Our design includes ample soft landscaping and adheres to all zoning requirements. The proposed driveway is 3 meters wide compared to the existing driveway, which is 3.3 meters wide. We got a couple of our neighbors commenting that they're not a big fan of some of the newer boxy infills that are happening in the neighborhood. So our response to that was to design a house with the traditional sloped roof. Next slide, please. And just a couple quick slides on the front and rear elevations. And the next slide, please, which is the right and left elevations of our proposed design. Next slide, please. We also consulted with our arborist, and there will be no trees proposed to be removed or impacted during this construction. Next slide, please. We also looked at some examples of the detached garages in the rear yard with some of our neighboring properties, which are 162 Lyman and 153 Lyman. And as you've seen this in these images, the garages occupy the majority of the rear yard, increasing the hardscaping and reducing green space drastically. If our application is not supported, our remaining option, which does not require variances, is to build a large detached garage in the backyard. Next slide, please. So in summary, why do we want an attached garage? We want protection from storms and theft, which have become more prevalent over the last few years in Ottawa. We want to provide a safe and convenient transition for our young children and aging parents from outdoor activities into our home. We would like electric vehicle battery preservation, better curb appeal. I have one more slide.
That's fine, keep going.
Thank you. More green space and play area in the backyard, and also to reduce hardscaping that can contribute to urban heat island effect. Finally, our last slide. Next slide, please. The 4 tests. We have shared our personal intentions for this minor variance. We believe that our plans pass the 4 tests and align with our review of the relevant city and provincial policies. A detailed analysis of the relevant policy review with citations can be found in our cover letter. But to summarize, we believe that the application is minor in nature. The garage's front relocation is minor, increasing outdoor amenity space without impacting neighbors' sunlight, privacy, views, or openness. We believe the application is desirable for the appropriate development of the lands in question. It aligns with the diverse designs in the neighborhood, similar massing to the other local developments, and it emphasizes ground level office and principal entry. It conforms to the general intent and purpose of the official plan. It encourages densification with established residential areas, supporting 15-minute neighborhoods, adds housing diversity and affordable options, preserves a front yard green space, and promotes climate positive actions with an electric car charging port. And it reduces hardscape and hides parking and storage from public view, which encourages alternate transit use. And lastly, it conforms to the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. It maintains the character and detached dwelling typology of the R1S zoning, supports additional housing choices and home-based work opportunities, and it complies with R1S subzone provisions and introduces updated design aesthetics. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Roshana Farr, because I think this is a very good presentation, and the committee really appreciates the time that you've taken and the well-prepared presentation that we just heard. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Good. So there will be questions, I'm quite sure. So I'm going to open up to the members of the panel on this. Any questions? Yes, Member Blood.
Could staff please put up the elevations for the rear of the house? Just have a question for the applicants. That's, I was just curious about the size of the balcony in the rear at above grade. How deep is that?
Sorry, we have it exactly here, or almost. The depth of the porch.
Yeah.
The rear covered porch is 18 by 7. So 7 depth, 7 feet.
And I'm assuming that staff have looked at that and that meets the projection standards of the bylaw.
Thank you for your question. I don't believe that I included that in my zoning review, but if that was not compliance, then it will be caught a building permit and they'd have to reduce the size.
That's just a question I had regarding the size of the porch. You got to watch it with this bylaw.
Absolutely. I believe we have worked with our architect to make sure that it's met.
Yeah. Okay. As someone who got caught, I just thought I'd give you a heads up. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
All right, other questions from panel members? Yes, go ahead, Member Coakley.
This actually is more of a question to Ms. Linkler eventually. First of all, I'd echo what the chair said about the quality of the presentation. I mean, you answered most of the questions that I had in the back of my mind very effectively. I am very impressed. I'm not a fan of front-facing garages that don't meet the streetscape analysis, but I'm very impressed with the fact that you reached out to your neighbors and got support from them, which is kind of where my question to Ms. Linkler goes. I get your concerns because it doesn't conform with the streetscape analysis that, that front-facing garages are not a dominant characteristic here. But for that, given the support of, were that not a kind of a, for want of a better word, a technical issue, and I realize it's not like it's more than technical, but would the support of the neighborhood, the neighbors, attenuate your concerns about a front-facing garage being out of character with the neighborhood with such obvious support from the neighbors?
Thank you for your question. My understanding is that for a minor variance, there's 4 tests and it has to meet all 4 tests. So I have concerns about it not meeting the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw. So we're raising those concerns. We're not recommending refusal directly, but we are raising those concerns. And I always do encourage that applicants do consult with their neighbors to get letters of support to help them with their variances at committee, but I can't change staff's direct opinion.
I have a follow-on question to that, actually. So I was going to go there too. So in terms of how you obtained these letters of support, so I just sort of checked the ones that are in support based on the municipal address. So can you just tell me a little bit about how you went about to get those letters?
Yes, absolutely. So there's 16 houses on Lyman Street and 16 houses on Mulvey Hill, which is right behind us, a very identical, almost looking street. We went with letters printed with our plans and what we were looking for. We knocked on every single door and we talked to a lot of the neighbors, whoever was home, and absolutely all of them were supportive. A few of them were quite elderly and were not comfortable using email and sending an email, but they were very supportive. And then the other ones, some of them sent letters. And if they were not home, we left the letters for them in their mailbox.
Right. The reason I ask is because the municipal addresses, which we have this specifically support for, are actually not directly adjacent to you. So you've got, 166, 165, which are, like 3 houses down, and you've got then 143 and 144. It's 2 houses down, but not the immediate neighbors at all on this. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, the one to the left is a rental property. So we were not able to talk with the owner. We left a letter with with the tenants. And the one to our right, I believe it's 146. The owner is Brent. He sent me a message yesterday actually saying he's very supportive of our application, but they haven't sent in, we didn't want to bug them again and go back to ask for support. We
All right,
thought
thank you.
what
Thank
we
you.
got was sufficient support.
Just wanted to get a sense of how you obtained that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Member Coakley? Member Lecaillé, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think my question's for Ms. Linker. I recall the applicant mentioning that there was a minor variance approval that the committee granted back, I don't know if it was last year or the year before. Can you speak to whether when the bylaw changed? Like, I'm just kind of curious of whether when that was granted, the bylaw changed after. So I just want to know that before I take that into account.
Thank you for the question. The bylaw introducing restrictions on garages in the streetscape character analysis, I believe, was introduced late 2020. I believe I remember the file that they're describing. I could be thinking of a different one, but I think that it did request the same variance that they're requesting, but it was on a different street and was subject to a different streetscape character analysis, number of houses and which houses were observed.
Okay, thank you.
If I may add to that, it was 153 Mulvey Hill, and it was in September 2022 that the hearing was. We did a lot of studying of YouTube videos in preparation.
Okay, so it sounds though that it because it's a different street, it might have had a different result because of the streetscape analysis.
It was very similar. It was the exact same. That actually was the only house with the garage, asking for a garage. On Lyman, there is one other house with a garage.
Interesting. Okay, that was before our time. Okay, so thank you for that. Any other questions from panel members? All right, I have a couple of questions, and they're really for Ms. Linker at this point. So Ms. Linker, remind me, carports would be permitted, and cantilevered spaces would be permitted?
Thank you for the question. So an attached front-facing carport would be treated the same as an attached front-facing garage under the streetscape character analysis, so that would require a variance as well. A detached garage or detached carport would not require a variance from the streetscape character analysis, and a cantilever design, subject to how far it's cantilevering, would not require a variance either.
All right. Had you considered a cantilevered space in order to meet the bylaw?
Yes, we did. But as you see probably in one of the letters from 150 Mulvey Hill, they did a build with a cantilevered garage. And they were mentioning to us that they have had things taken from under the cantilever, so bikes, strollers, and so on. So that is one reason, and I believe that's in the email that you have received from 150 Mulvey Hill. So that's one reason we didn't want that, and we just wanted to reduce also the clutter and have better curb appeal.
All right, thank you. Member Lecaillé, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, you had mentioned in your oral remarks about the fact that the current bylaw allows you to have that garage at the back, and you would have the option. You showed a couple examples in your neighborhood that had kind of really extra long ones. I'm just curious if this was granted, are you, and maybe it's in here, and again, kind of start at a certain part of the day, some of the applications start to jumble back together, so I don't want to make assumptions. I want to make sure I understand, is that your intentions would be to get rid of the detached garage in order to increase the soft landscaping? And if that is the case, I'm curious if you have a percentage amount of the soft landscaping that would be increasing as a result of removing that hard landscaping in the back. I guess that kind of the driveway that goes behind the home.
We don't have the exact percentage, but as you can see in the site plan, if we can put it up briefly, please, it is going to be green space and backyard space, and there's not going to be any buildings where the current detached garage is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. Ms. Linker, anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
All right. I don't have anybody on my speakers list, but I'm going to make a call out. Is there
One
anyone?
more, sorry, one more last one, Madam Chair. I
What's that?
apologize. One more last question for the applicant. I noticed that this had a secondary suite.
Correct.
Yeah, and so are there any additional, like, is this being funded through your own, or are you applying to any federal programs for that?
We are not aware of any federal programs that we could be benefiting from, but it's for they would be funded by us.
Okay, so it's not like okay. Sometimes we see applications that have applications through certain programs that add secondary suites or housing stock. So I just wanted to know about that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna make my call out again. Is there anyone in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application? Is that 150 Lyman? Going once, going twice? All right. In that case, members of the panel, I think we're going to reserve. Or so actually, yes, we do want to give you 2 minutes to recap.
I think we're good. We covered everything. It's just we're hoping to build a dream family home for a young growing family, and this would really help our dreams come true.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, back to the panel members and the we're going to reserve. You want to reserve? Ms. Member Lukigi, reserve or no reserve? Yes? Nope. All right, we're not going to reserve. In that case, then I need all those in favor. All right, so that means we have 3, 4. So 3 of the members. I am going to, I'm opposed to the application, but that doesn't matter because 3 means that you've got your approval. So the application is granted. So I think that's all we need to do. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, that brings us to the next application, which is for, where are we here? It was 151 and what was the other one?
577 Melbourne.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm going to get you just to introduce yourselves for the record, please.
Evan Saunders with Photon Planning and Design, municipal address 396 Cooper Street.
And once again, Jacob Bolduc, Photon Planning and Design. Good to see you.
All right, so gentlemen, we're looking for a presentation from you. So who's taking the lead?
I'll take the lead on this one, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, great.
We do have a presentation package that was submitted. If we could have that pulled up, please. Thank you. And I think we'll jump to slide 3, if you don't mind. Panel members, this is an application or a site that you've seen before. You might recall this from the fall when we came in with an application for consents and minor variances. The minor variance applications were, or applications were all related to the building design. There were no variances requested for the consent to sever the lands, and therefore the consent was actually granted, as shown, I believe, on slide 4, which might be slide 5 of the PDF. Thanks. So this application was granted because the variances were only related to the interior side yard setback, the rear yard setback, as well as the front facing garage and driveway width. So the minor variance applications were refused, and in that time, if we move now to slide 6, please, 6 on the bottom right. Thank you. We took the time to look at the feedback received from the community, from the panel members as part of our discussion, from staff, and have reworked the application to come forward with a new set of variances and a revised building design. If we move to the next slide, there's a bit of a summary as to the actual changes. So previously, we had a double wide driveway that was proposed. We had made an effort to reduce the width of the driveway for the vast majority of the length of it, but it did widen as it got close to the double wide garage, and therefore it was considered a double wide driveway. In this case, which goes along with variance number 2, we've actually reduced the width of the garage from a double wide to a single wide front facing garage, which of course requires a variance under the streetscape character analysis. But as a result, the change that was made is to a single wide driveway, which would be permitted if it leads to a permitted parking space, being the garage, which is the variance. There's no change to the rear yard. It's still a variance as technically triggered as a percent of the lot depth is how you measure the rear yard in this case. We require 8.6 meters, but we are proposing 7.5. There's no change there. I believe staff was supportive of that particular variance at the time. The reason being, at least in our planning rationale, that the rear yard as proposed is actually increased versus the existing building on the site, as well as it's aligned with its neighbors, and 7.5 meters is a fairly typical rear yard setback in most parts of the city of Ottawa. So generally speaking, I do believe there's still no concerns at the staff level with the rear yard setback, which leads me to my discussion of the other variances, the interior side yard setbacks specifically. The previous design was targeting an interior side yard setback as small as 0.68 meters. In this case, we've actually heard loud and clear from both staff and the community to provide a little bit more room between the buildings. And so all of the side yards have been increased to a minimum width of 1.2 meters. The bylaw requires 1.5 meters because we're located within the Westboro overlay. It's my understanding that the 1.5 meters comes from the intent of preserving certain characteristics within the neighborhood where you typically had buildings with wider side yard setbacks. I do have some slides that would show that as a result of infill and new construction and just growth over time, that a lot of the setbacks in the community are very similar to what we're proposing at 1.2. And therefore, we would argue that under the 4 tests, it's not necessarily causing any undue adverse impacts on the community. So moving to some of our more context slides, if we could go to the next slide, please, 9 on the bottom right. With respect to front-facing garage, you can see the change that was proposed. We previously had 2 double-wide garages for both properties. They also included a front yard pathway that was separated by a landscape buffer in order to reduce the impacts. The revised version is 2 single-car garages with single-wide driveways. We think this is a lot more in line with the feedback that we received as part of the last submission. I would note that as part of our streetscape character analysis, we are only, I believe, 1 garage off from being permitted a garage as of right. There are a lot of front-facing garages in this community and within our 21 house data set, but unfortunately, we're just 1 off. So if we go to, I'm actually going to slide forward to, let's go to 13, please. We're just noting in this slide in particular, the interior side yard setbacks for some new construction in the neighborhood. Noticing that it's about within the 1 to 1.2 meter range is pretty typical for new construction. The next slide is a little more focused on the garage. You can see here, these are the blue house in the top right is actually directly across the street from us. House number 2 is just a little bit to the northwest. And then further north on the site, we also have 2 existing front yard garages. If we go back, and I apologize for bouncing around a little bit, but I'd like to go back to slide 3, please.
Go ahead, just keep going, Mr. Baldur.
I do apologize for going over. Sorry, 4. Nope, 1 more back. My apologies. 2 on the bottom right, PDF number 3. Sorry. So this is the existing condition, right? The house is located quite a little further back on the lot, and you can see that there's quite a grade rise on the site, which leads to, in the top right, the existing adjacent property, which has a front-facing garage adjacent to the side of the house, but that is equal to the front wall of the house, and that actually provides a 0 lot line on that side. So we are limited in terms of what is available on that side. And if we were to go to the house immediately to the north of us, which is perhaps best shown on slide 15, bottom right number. Thank you. The house on the left in this image is the house immediately to the north of us. You can see it's a rather new construction, front-facing garage, quite a bit of stone masonry at the front, which both makes the garage feel a little bit smaller, but also kind of provides some presence at the front of the house. But I would note that that house actually has a setback of 1.26 meters as per our survey to our property line. So the setback that we are proposing on the north side is very similar, if not almost identical, to the house that is right next to us, which is new construction within the last 10 years. And then, as I said, on the south side, we actually have a zero lot line condition. So we're providing a greater setback than what our neighbor provides us in that case. And both houses, both on either side of us, have front facing garages as well as the house across the street. So I do have more context images. I am mindful that I'm over time, but we did do a walkabout of the community and have several context images showing that while the intent of the 1.5 meters is to provide for greater separation, a lot of new development doesn't necessarily follow it. I would also argue that 1.2 meters, 4 feet, is entirely sufficient for a regular single detached home in an infill condition. Hydro, for example, requires 1.2 meters to provide safe access for their workers based on the comments we received. The other comment in general is just about, and I'll end on this note, thank you, is the streetscape character analysis would allow for a driveway to go alongside of a house to the rear yard. That's a pretty significant increase in hardscape. That was a question that we saw in the last file that just came up. I did a little bit of quick math. It would result in about 20 square meters of additional driveway. I think we're trying to balance the priorities of the official plan with respect to infill, but also the amount of hardscape and stormwater runoff that we're generating. So in this case, with the reduced driveway, based on our last plan, we actually hit a 50% landscape in the front yard, and the driveway leads to the garage. And as you heard, garages are becoming, they've always been requested, but especially in the age of increased car thefts, of electric vehicle charging in a winter climate, these garages are, I don't want to say more and more necessary. So how do we balance that? Do we put it at the back and increase the amount of hardscape? Or do we allow for it in certain front yard conditions where the neighborhood generally has them? And is that better planning? I would argue yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Balduke. Again, good presentation. I think for us, the evidence that we really need for this, and I wouldn't go too far with the presentation quite yet, because I think I need to see a little more evidence with regards to the surrounding context, because what's really at play here is the results of the streetscape analysis. So if you've got other slides in your presentation that you think might help provide additional photographic evidence for us, that would be helpful.
Sure thing. I would start at slide 13, as noted in the bottom right. And you can kind of follow our walkabout of the neighborhood. And we just went all around the block. So we went up Melbourne, we went around and we checked out a lot of the both existing and newer developments. So we'll start here and you'll see, again, the pattern of setbacks between new constructing buildings. And yes, generally, I would say they are flat roof buildings because.
Can I just get them, like the municipal address as you go so that I can sort of see how that relates to your property?
If you jump to the next slide, we actually include a key map that might be more helpful for you. So the blue property is identified, and I don't think I have the actual addresses outlined, but the key map would enable you to find them. The blue property is our property, and you can see immediately across the street is number 1, followed by number 2, a little bit to the northwest. And then the other 2 properties, 3 and 4, although I see a star is missing, would be further up to the north of us, so that 2 cluster. And then if you switch to the next slide, you can see the context of the houses immediately next to us. Those were 2 infill developments built circa 2015 that both feature front-facing garages and single detached driveways, or sorry, single wide driveways. The next slide, if you go to slide 16, we went further up the street on Melbourne to go up and see a lot of the new development that occurred up in this area. And you can see that there are several buildings for which we have front-facing garages, wide driveways. A lot of this work was completed back in the fall when we could take better pictures. And we were looking at a double wide driveway at this time. So some of this is a little less relevant now that we've revised our application. But I would note that you can see a pattern of new construction with respect to side yard setbacks and front-facing garages. We can keep going as well. Next slide, please. Going back around the block onto the other side, again, you can see a pattern of front yard development where you have reduced side yard setbacks that are generally equivalent to what we're proposing at 1.2 meters, as well as front yard and in a lot of cases, double wide driveways up in this area.
I'm just going to ask you a quick question then. So in terms of the streetscape analysis, so some of these examples that are further north, I'm going to guess, are they taken into consideration for that streetscape analysis, or would they be outside of the boundaries used?
Those lots would be outside of the boundary. You only look at the 21 lots or fewer, depending on where your lot is located on your block. But we wanted to go outside of it to show the broader context, because it's important to note that while we are one garage off, one of the concerns is about, are we going to tip the balance for other lots in the area and therefore kind of trigger a cascade of front yard garages being permitted? To that, I would say that every house is evaluated based on its own data set. Our 21 houses that we have to look at are not the same as everyone else's 21 houses. So it's very hard to speculate on, are we going to create this cascade? I'm simply trying to make a note that garages are prominent within the community along Melbourne and in the larger blocks. And we don't feel like we're doing anything that detracts from the community or the character. As permitted, again, going back to the pattern of rear yard and side yard garages that are permitted under the SCA, it's not only a hardscape increase, but it's really reliant on a pattern that already exists. So there is a portion of Melbourne, and it's similar to the neighborhood I grew up in, now that I think about it, where you have a garage, you have a driveway alongside one side of the house, and the other side of the house would almost be on the 0 lot line. But if you have a pattern of this as part of a subdivision, then everybody's driveway essentially acts as a side yard setback, even if the ownership is a little different. That's great if you're laying out a whole city block. It's very difficult to work when you're trying to do infill, because if somebody doesn't do it, the next person can't do it, and so on and so forth. So when you're managing infill, you really have to kind of consider what's going on in the area. How do you manage your own conditions? How do you manage your own impacts? And how do you work with the site-specific conditions that are applicable to you? Our side, we do have a 0 lot line with the front-facing garage right against us on the south side. Okay, well, do we put ours to the back and increase the hardscape? Is that better, or is working with the pattern that I think we're showing, and we do have even more context slide and maybe closer if we go to slide 19. You can see that we wanted to evaluate that corner. I don't believe that corner is actually included in the SCA because it's the end of the street. So you don't necessarily jump over. In that case, we wanted to show that 2 of those houses, as well as one further in on Melbourne, both have big, beautiful garages. We're not necessarily the outlier in this area, despite mathematically not being within the bounds of the SCA.
All right, thank you. Okay. Member Copeland.
Yeah, I'm afraid SCA is my bugaboo, but maybe Miss Linkler can, maybe you may know the answer, but I'm sorry, if we could keep that one the slide up on the screen. So just so because I've had great difficulty wrapping my mind around this concept. You are on this one, you are the property in blue. Okay. And what you said earlier actually gets to the core of my concern, that you're sort of, according to your calculations, you're 1 away from not having to ask us for permission. So effectively, so just, sorry, if I could just follow through my logic here. Effectively, if we say yay today, nobody else has to come and ask for permission to put a front-facing garage in. And that's where my question is, what is the streets, what are the lots that are part of the 21 that would be covered by, if we grant it today, they would not have to come back? Is it both sides of the street in that block, or is it some subset there, or does it extend? I didn't think it extended past the block line, past the next street. But again, if somebody could tell me the technical, which 21 do you count? I mean,
How do we get it
whoever knows
from
the
Ms.
answer.
Linker? Ms. Linker, why don't you provide us with the methodology, I guess?
Thank you for the question. So that's correct that on Melbourne Avenue, staff looked at only the houses that fronted on and faced Melbourne Avenue. So that's where the principal entrance is facing that street. On this streetscape character analysis, we didn't include any of the corner lots as their principal entrances faced Avondale Avenue, and the purpose of the SCA is to focus on the facades that share a principal entrance and a garage to ensure that the principal entrance remains the primary character or primary feature on that facade. So in this case, I believe we analyzed 19 lots along Melbourne. That was within the entire block, excluding the corner lots, and 10 of those lots had no front-facing attached garage, and 9 of the lots did have a front-facing attached garage. So on this street, if they did receive this minor variance, then it would be 9 properties on this street having no front-facing attached garage and 10 having a front-facing attached garage. So the 9 remaining could have a front-facing attached garage without coming to the Committee of Adjustment for a minor variance.
So that, I guess that is, and therein lies the root of my concern as a matter of principle about streetscape analysis, that we grant one and then another and another, and before we know where we are, the entire street or the rest of the street can come for can build a front-facing garage, or whatever the other things are covered by the streetscape analysis. I was in the room when you made your point about it would be silly to ask somebody to build an extra foot or two on the front of their house just to be able to get their car parked. I will take no part in the decision on that file. I thought that was interesting. That strikes me as being something legitimate for us to consider. I'm not sure it's legitimate in the same way for us to sort of opine from a sort of a policy point of view on whether garages at the back of a house with a laneway attached to them are better than in some inherent way because of hard landscaping and things like that. I think that is something for me anyway. There's a city council decision to make, not for me to make. So if you've got another wonderful argument like the one about it would be silly to force someone to build a wall, you can try me on it as to why I shouldn't be so worried about the streetscape analysis tipping the balance now. But I'll be honest with you, that's where my concern sits at this point. I will also say I'm subject to something that anybody might say subsequently. I am considerably less fussed about the side, the side, the 1.2 versus some larger amount of space down the side. But this one, I'm afraid it does really, it bothers me.
I'm happy to speak to that if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Boulder.
So the streetscape character analysis, I remember when this was developed, it came out of infill 1, infill 2. There was a lot of discussion at the time of what parameters do you set? What houses do you look at? What houses do you not look at? I don't want to say it's arbitrary in the sense that there are a guide and clear rules to follow when preparing your streetscape character analysis. But you'll note, as Ms. Linker said, that there are certain exclusions that don't count possibly in some situations in our favor, that maybe they should. So for example, the corner lots where the garage faces the other side, we're looking at another house in the neighborhood, an older house, not new infill, with a double wide garage and a double wide driveway. I recognize that it doesn't necessarily face the same street as us, and therefore the streetscape is a little different, but it exists. It's part of the neighborhood. It's part of your experience when you're walking around. It's part of the streetscape as part of the community as a whole. And I think that's what I've tried to demonstrate here through the context slides that have been provided, is that if you were to limit it specifically to the 21 houses, which, let's face it, that itself is a little arbitrary. If that was limited to 9, would we have the same questions? If that was limited to 15, would it be the same question? So recognizing that those are the criteria that were set through the streetscape character analysis, technically we don't comply. There's no argument that the variance is required. I can understand the concern about tipping the balance, but that's the mathematics. That's simply the way it rolls. What I'm trying to demonstrate is we're not doing anything that other people aren't doing. Some of those houses that are included in the streetscape character analysis, like I noted, are older houses with the driveway situation that I had explained, where the driveway is on one side of the house and then the house is right above the lot line. That's a pattern that if it exists, it's great and technically works against us. It's not something we can typically recreate through infill. So we have to take a bit of a broader scope than the SCA and take a look at what's happening in the community and then kind of narrow it down to what kind of solutions can we propose that we think balances the priorities of the official plan, as well as the priorities for infill and what the market is asking for. We do have clients coming to us saying, I need a garage. I need one. I'm concerned about theft of my vehicle. I'm concerned about where my kids are going to put their bikes. Waste collection, I want to make sure I've got somewhere for my bins. And I don't want to have to shovel an extra long driveway and bring everything down from the backyard just because that's what the SCA says. So I do recognize that mathematically, again, everyone has a bit of a different data set. So it's not a one-to-one. The 21 lots that are being evaluated or the 19 are based on our location and typically would be the 5 lots on the right, the 5 lots on the left, and then the 11 lots across the street. So you can imagine that everything is on a case-by-case basis. So to summarize my point, there's no argument that we don't meet the SCA. That's the purpose of the variance. What we're trying to demonstrate through the 4 tests is that we think this is a better solution for infill under the OP and the zoning bylaw. We think it's desirable and appropriate for the use of the building in the sense that it provides function. The garage, I would note, as part of the design that Chris Simmons provided is actually, maybe this will help. I think it's slide 10, if you don't mind. Thank you. We wanted to show how the garage is not necessarily at the front of the house or dominating in the way that it would be for, say, an 80s suburb. I think there was a lot of concern when the SCA was being developed that we didn't want to recreate these conditions where the garage is at the front of the house and the main entrance is sort of recessed behind it. That's not a good streetscape. So one of the things we look at when we're proposing front-facing garage is where is the main living area and what kind of relationship does the house have with the street? And so similar to the other buildings, but I would argue that I think we've done a little bit of a better job, is having one of the main living areas right on top of the garage. And because of the existing grade, you can see the existing average grade, the garage kind of fits into the ground. And that means that we don't necessarily have a second floor or a raised living area that dominates and overlooks the neighborhood. It's much closer to grade. It's much closer to a better relationship with the street. So I understand the concern about tipping the balance. The math is clear. I can't speak to that. I can speak to the impacts and note that what we're proposing is generally in line with what we're seeing in the community and what we're seeing with other infill. And I would ask you to consider, based on our walkabout and the context drawings that you've seen, is a single car garage or a single detached house an impact? Is it an issue?
All right, thank you, Mr. Belder. I just want to make one point, though. So yes, it's true. There's a lot more car theft and just theft generally speaking. But so a garage is a good solution, but I just want to be clear that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they can still have a garage in the back of the property, right?
That's correct. But to come back to my point about that, it would increase the amount of hardscape. And when balancing priorities in the official plan with respect to stormwater management and green space, I don't know if that's a more appropriate solution than allowing for something that exists in the community already.
Agreed on that in the sense that, and I think Member Coakley had some good comments with regards to that. It's not, you know, that is for something, that balance is actually a policy decision of, you know, city council that needs to come down. Right now, we're dealing with what's, you know, what we have to deal with essentially. So, okay. Member Dakidi, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just one question on, refresh my memory. If you could put up that slide that was just up again, with the 2 cars. One of them was curved. Can you remind me the reason why it's curved? Was that to protect a tree? The one on the right?
I'm happy to speak to that. We did go through an extensive TIR process. There was some potential for curved driveways on both lots, but yes, for the right, it is 100% to preserve a tree within the right of way. There was another tree on the left building or the north building, I guess I would say. That was entirely within the city's right of way. Our TIR indicated that it was in fair health, as I recall. But the city's decision was that it would be best if it was taken down and new front yard plantings were included, which is what we're showing in our renderings.
Perfect, thank you.
And just another question for me. So I'm looking at exactly this slide and I'm looking at the average grade. You made the comment that, you know, the livable space is actually not like towering over. So can you just explain to me this average grade and how that works again?
Yep, I'm happy to. If you can keep the slide in mind when you go, I think we've seen it before, but I think slide 3. Slide 2, as indicated on the bottom right again. Thank you. I think the top right maybe shows, so the house that you can see in the image on the right is the existing house. So if you look just to the right, you can see our house, the property that to the south, and you can see that there's quite a steep increase and their garage goes essentially in there. And our house is raised quite a bit as it is compares to the right of way. So effectively the front yard slopes down considerably. And so right now we have stairs with steps, as you can see on the image, that would go up towards the house. In this case, because we're proposing a driveway, that would go, again, going back to the other image, but the average grade sort of into the ground, so that we have a sort of semi-sunken garage condition. That being said, overall, the lot does slope quite considerably towards the right of way.
And is that, and that holds true for how many of the lots, like the whole street, or is it?
It's fairly considerable on the street. If we go back to maybe slide 15 provides a little more context. So if you can keep in mind, that's the house on the right, that's our house, and now I'll switch over to the house on the left. It's mostly concentrated on this side of Melbourne. The other side, the west side of Melbourne, doesn't necessarily have the same grade considerations. They're a little flatter. But you can see you do have the steps leading up to the main entrance. And a lot of that is based on the grade that was available when the house was developed. So their existing average grade at the time. So everybody's kind of setting their houses into that hill.
All right, thank you. That's very helpful, actually. Okay. Any other questions from panel members? Yeah, member Dickey, go ahead.
Not a question, just a comment of thank you for making a very clear, sometimes when months go by and another, you know, the application kind of comes back, it's confusing of like what's changed, and you made that very clear, and I just want to say thank you and that it was appreciated.
All right, thank you. Other questions at this point? All right, not seeing anything. Ms. Linker, anything that you would like to add based on the discussion we just had?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have anything to add.
All right, okay. So on this one, let's see, no speakers on my speakers list, but is there anyone in the audience or online who'd be interested in speaking to this? Come on down. And if you could just give us your name and your municipal address, that'd be great.
My name is Tim Gray, Timgray, 190 West Village Private, and I am with the Westboro Community Association. So the original application, we were opposed to it, but considering the changes that have been made, we are now in support of it. And a lot of the discussion that I've heard today is discussion. Same points were brought up in our discussion about this project. I did bring up the fact that this is going to tip the balance, and maybe not exactly this project, but the next one. The whole street will be free to have a front-facing garage. And, unfortunately, that's just the way the bylaw has been set up. And the other thing we looked at is on that street, there is a cluster of front-facing garages kind of on that side of the street and up at that end of the street. So for us, we appreciate what the city is trying to do. We understand the situation, but you can't just boil it down to the numbers, and the numbers are close, that's for sure. So that we do consider that, but there's also other considerations that, we want to, we look at the project in a whole. So, and we realize that we need more homes, and this project will bring an additional home to Westboro. So, another thing is that we also look at is where is it located within Westboro? Is it very close to, the LRT or very close to transit? So this is, kind of up at one end. And the context for that is this a project where someone could get away with not having a car? Well, we felt that, definitely where it's located within the community, it's pushing the limit. Hopefully they would limit themselves to one car and, use transit, but, like I said, they made some considerable changes, and our main objection in the first application was the double garage and the double driveway. And one thing we hear about all the time is trees, trees, trees. And in this situation, the reduction of that, will give more green space. So, and one other thing that was brought up and to us is, in the rear yard, there's going to be a tree, a substantial tree removed. And I noticed that in the just the staff report that, forestry is concerned about, also always concerned about. So we're hoping that in the rear yard, now that it's a little bit bigger, they'll be able to accommodate, one tree on each property in the rear yard. So other than that, like I say, it's support. We're supportive of it now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gray. Any questions? Yes, Deborah Coakley.
Are you aware, Mr. Gray, of like the presentation we had from the previous one?
Yeah.
The actually neighbors in the immediate, like left and right across the road, are you aware of any? I mean, we have an indication that there's somebody from 582 who's opposed, but other than that.
I actually spoke to the neighbor directly beside them, and he said, he was in favor of it. And this was in the first application, he was in favor of it. And when I spoke to him, I told him that the Westboro Community Association was not in favor of it based on the, double garage and the double wide. So for us, that's a broader concern of the community, not just, it wasn't just that particular property. So we don't want to see, double garages and double wide driveways, but, we really seriously talk about front-facing garages. And it's a complex issue, and like I say, it's not just, 10 versus 9 or, whatever it is. It's a really difficult for people to understand, like a layman. So it takes a bit of, conversation with people, so.
All right, thank you. That was very helpful of you to attend today. Thank you. All right, is there anyone else, either in the audience or online, who would like to speak to this application? All right, I'm not seeing anybody. So with that, Mr. Balduke, you've got a couple of minutes to recap.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may start, I would just like to thank Mr. Gray. Those were very helpful comments, and we do appreciate it. This is one of the rare files perhaps where an application is refused and we come back and generally we try to push and pull, right? If we're going to reduce what was a problem, we try to gain a little bit elsewhere and make the best design for our client. I'd reiterate that this is a change that is entirely pulling. We had smaller setbacks, we made them bigger. We had a double wide garage, we made it smaller. We had a double wide driveway, we reduced it. We're really not doing anything to try to make up for that elsewhere. We're simply responding to the feedback that we received. And that's why, again, I'm very thankful to Mr. Gray for speaking in support of the application because we heard the community association loud and clear. And that's a large result of why you're seeing the revised design today. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Reserve, would you like to reserve? Member Lecoyer? No, no reserving? No, member Blathaway? I think we can go to a decision. All right, no, let's reserve. All right, let's just reserve. It won't take too long, I think, for this one. So, okay. So that's our decision. We are reserving. You may have expected that. But as you know, you'll get the written decision soon. So within 10 days. All right, thank you. I think that's the end of our agenda. So if everyone's okay, we're adjourning. All right, thank you. So we're adjourned.